We have a wonderful show today and some incredible guests. Our topic today is diversity and inclusion. How far have we come? But it's just occurred to me that Rocki and Ashley, this might be your first time here, and you've brought guests with you, I'm sure, in the sidebar. So if you're not familiar with the format, Erika, why don't you explain them how we do things here at Working Lunch?
Sure. So we every week we talk about a different topic. So Debbie has already very kindly introduced the topic for this week, a very important one. And before we get into all of that, it is a tradition to have a chat about what everybody is eating or has already had for lunch. This got started back when COVID first hit and everybody was at home and working by themselves and not in an office. So it's a weekly thing now. It used to be a daily thing where we would all talk about what we're having for lunch and then just have some chat and a chance to down tools for a bit. And I think that's still an important thing to do, particularly with how busy everybody seems right now. I haven't eaten yet. I usually look to this show for a little inspiration, actually. So, Ashley, did you eat yet?
Oh, doing it first time, taking off mute. I actually did when we were all in the group. I just had a salad. I usually go to the gym around lunchtime. Salad, bit of watermelon, keep it lean. I'm ready for the inevitable return to the beach, which is what I'm hoping to do when we're all allowed. And I don't want to look like a beached whale, so that's the motivation.
That's very healthy, very impressive.
I like it. I always have apples, but I'll have my apples in the morning. I'll have them after the show. It's too much chaos early. And Rocki, man, that's a good breakfast. Yum.
I will tell you. So, I have for the last several months been looking to lose a little bit weight and to get a little bit healthier. Not because I mind looking like a beach whale. I'm a Black girl. I'm curvy. I love it. And I've been married for almost 30 years. He's not going anywhere. But I wanted to feel better. And I figured out I'm a protein girl. I like my brain functions when I have protein in the morning. And so I have these chicken sausage links and hummus in the morning. It may sound weird, but it's very tasty and it keeps me going through lunch without being hungry. So as soon as we're done here, I'm going downstairs and I'm getting my chicken sausage and my hummus.
It sounds great to me.
It is. It really is.
Well, awesome. And we're going to start to see some other folks filing in. We've got some regulars. I'm sure we've got some new folks too, courtesy of our guests. And important show today, folks. Yesterday was a big day that marked the 1-year anniversary since George Floyd's murder in the U.S. And that was unfortunately not an uncommon event. But it was, for some reason, it was the one that really, it broke us, and I think it created an uproar that was palpable for the first time. And the most magical part about it, at least from my perspective, is that it wasn't Black people. It wasn't Black voices exclusively clamoring for change. It was felt globally, and it was felt across all races. And it was something where I think there were a lot of people saying enough. And a lot has changed in a year. We have seen BLM become a movement that's global, right? BLM has been in existence since 2013, but people know it today, right? Today we know it. We've seen some police reform. We've seen some changes in historical landmarks being demolished and people demanding change. Okay, and it's wonderful. But I think, at least for me, I can't look at my news feed without seeing something about D&I or DEI, and I love it. I'd love to see it. But how much has really changed? Okay. And that's what we're talking about today, is How far have we come in this year? And I think that the biggest question about diversity and inclusion and this movement is, I guess, why? Why should we want D&I? Why should we be insisting upon it? And what's the value? And I would love to hear Ashley's perspective on this, because I know that this is something that you regularly are making a business case for, opening eyes.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I kick off, I mean, hopefully I will be preaching to a lot of the converted. So in a way, feel free to go back to the fridge and finish off lunch. If you've heard some of this stuff before. But broadly.
Sorry, just to interject. Sorry, Ashley. Could you just introduce me? We didn't do introductions.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We did that before the show. Yes, and let's do that, Ashley. Why don't you just quickly give yourself an introduction, and then afterwards, I would love for Rocki, for you to introduce yourself as well.
Got it. So let me rewind.
Yes.
What happens when it's like a TV show? There's all all the chat before, and then you're just like, you continue off, and then you're like, oh yeah, I forgot.
We've been talking for a half an hour.
Yeah, I was like, you don't know me? Hold on, what? No, but my name's Ashley Ainsley. I am the co-founder of an organisation, which is a social enterprise or not-for-profit, called Colour in Tech, based here in London. We've been going for really kind of like 5 years with the mission ultimately to make Europe a more inclusive technology ecosystem. And I think Europe, fundamentally it doesn't, racism doesn't stop at, some sort of imaginary border which somebody created a few hundred years ago. So the reality is we'll start where we can and we'll expand out from, what we can do with a global mission, really. What does that mean we do in reality? Well, we run a number of programs focused at school leavers, those folks finishing university, working professionals, entrepreneurs, to really try and ultimately support their avenues into tech, whether that's setting up their own businesses and getting funding, whether that's getting their first interviews or whatever it be. And I'm fortunate to be able to call a lot of the folks in big tech, so the likes of the Googles and the Microsofts and Facebooks of this world, some of our partners who fund and help us, deliver on that mission. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Obviously happy if there are any questions to dive in a bit more about that. But I'll pass it over to Rocki.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, depending
Good evening,
depending on where you are in the world. My name is Rocki Howard. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer of Smart Recruiters. If you're not familiar, Smart Recruiters is leading the HR tech space in the talent acquisition suite market. And we've made a bold commitment to use and leverage our privilege in the market to help eradicate racism and bias in the recruiting process. And in addition to that, I am the host of the Voices of Diversity podcast. We believe that you can change the world one story, one conversation, one action at a time. And that's the purpose of that platform. And I identify as she, her, Black, Christian, Gen X, wife, mom, because I really do believe in all dimensions of my diversity. That's what I lead with, and that's how I show up in the world.
You guys, great intros. I'm glad we went back to them. Well, now everyone understands why we've got these two incredible voices with us today. Necessary voices, important voices, and empowered and informed voices. And so we're hoping you'll share those with some folks. Yes, you will be preaching to some of the converted, Ashley, but you know what? There are still people who are not, right? And just like we were talking about before the show, if diversity and inclusion was something that everyone wanted, then we would have it, right? So important conversation. So back to your area of expertise and really, why should everyone want it? There are the converted, but why should everyone who isn't already converted care and want this too?
Yeah. And I suppose if I go back to thinking about this, when I think about, leaders, and when you talk to many leaders, I mean, what's the thing, that's common to all of us? What's the thing that keeps lots of them up at night? It's people. If you've got the right people in your organization, you're pretty confident that things will go right. And even if the product's not good, if you've got the right people, you can make it good. Do you know what I mean? Even if the sales aren't working, if you've got the right salespeople, you can sell the stuff. Like, it all revolves back to people. And getting people right is fundamental to business. And ultimately, what's one of the big things that we can get wrong when managing and working with people? Well, really, it's groupthink, isn't it? Really, it's kind of like, the lack of challenge, the lack of motivation to strive to improve people and to improve our output. And ultimately selling into a sense of complacency, really. Like, we want to vitalize and mobilize our people. We want to inspire them and make sure that they're coming up with creative solutions and innovating and doing interesting things. And we want to avoid them falling into, as I said, a sense of group thinking and complacency around stuff. And this is where diversity becomes super important, because ultimately, how do you bring in, when you have great people, new ideas, new challenge, new stimulus to the conversation? Because we hire people, and hopefully we hire people better than ourselves. We know that we've got them doing great things. So really, the question for leaders is, how do I keep them doing that, really? Do you know what I mean? And if I don't, they leave. Like, do you know what I mean? If we don't stimulate our people to do amazing things, then, they'll go and do it somewhere else because they're great people. So the reality is, you've got to bring in something to challenge, something to stimulate, something to inspire, and make sure that you are adding that vitality into people's minds, into their work, into their products, into their automation, and all the things that they are doing. You have to have a dissenting voice sometimes, and voices sometimes that actually argue, are there better ways to do things? Have you considered that? Have you thought about that? And at all points in our life, whether it's our personal life, social life, there are sometimes when we go and we talk to people and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh, I didn't see things like that. And this is where the diversity conversation comes from. So, I could talk about, gender, ethnicity, LGBTQ+, disability, all the different diversity mentions. But if I boil this down fundamentally to people, what we want to do is have a real good mix of different people in a conversation. Because ultimately, what that's going to do is drive to better outputs. And that is seen when you look at, boards, when you look at FTSEs, when you look at tech products, whatever it is. When you get to having a good group and mix of people, the studies show that you ultimately have better results. And we can all think about that, whether that's in our colleges, our schools, our university, our leadership teams, wherever it is. When we have a room of people who are yes women, yes men, who are just doing what we think, we don't come out of that conversation right-sided. Do you know what I mean? We might come out thinking we're the dogs something else, or we might come at that conversation thinking that we are king of the castle. But ultimately, we really, as people, prefer those conversations, and people really challenge us to come up with something better. That's what stimulates me. That's what stimulates lots of people when they get into work, and that's why we really need diversity in the conversation. And then the consequences, well, what are the things that go wrong when you don't have that? Every week I produce a newsletter where there's stuff which I'm pointing out where things have happened badly because people are not doing things with diversity in mind, front center, and thinking about that. And it's not a zero-sum game. It's not a false dichotomy. It's not, if I have to do this, it means I can't do this. It's like, we need to do these things because, in the same way that you wouldn't launch a product without thinking about the pricing, really, you probably shouldn't launch a product without thinking about its impact on its users. And that does include its Black users, its female users, its disabled users, and all these other things. And that's why diversity matters, frankly.
Yeah.
For the people that are in the room that like stats, can I share a couple to back up what Ashley is saying?
Yeah.
So here's some interesting statistics, at least from my perspective, right? We know that companies with racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to perform at higher levels and have increased ROI.
Yeah.
Diverse teams are 87% better decision makers. Companies employing an equal number of men and women manage to produce up to 41% higher revenue. What company doesn't want higher revenue? And I think higher inclusive companies are much more likely to hit their financial targets and goals by up to 120%. And here's the other piece that's really, really interesting when you ask why we still need to have this conversation. And to Annette's point in the chat, why it shouldn't be rhetoric and why are we talking? Like, I'm already hearing people talk about diversity fatigue. Look, I could go on a tangent on the air. I could step up on the pulpit. I'll come down and stay down for a minute. But listen to
Don't do it on my account.
Well, I mean, I got to tell you, if you're diversity fatigued and you've been talking about it for 12 months, I've been talking about it for 52 years. Get in line, get over yourself, right? Like that's my pulpit and that's my preach, right? People should be able to show up in the world and be themselves and it not be this hard. And until we get there, nobody has the right to talk about their diversity fatigue. I'm yeah, okay. But
yeah, and Rocki, to that point, I will tell you, I mean, I've seen on my news feed, well, now I'm a white man, so I can't get employed anymore. I can't find a job anymore because now I'm the devil.
Oh, well, let's talk
and
about
I'm like,
that.
What?
Let's tell you what the stats say.
Yeah.
Men are twice as likely to get hired regardless of the hiring manager's gender. And when you look at all the stats, Black candidates are 50% less likely to receive callbacks as compared to white candidates, which is why we're starting to talk about all these processes we put in to try to prevent that. We talk about in the world where the world should be balanced. I know when Barack Obama was elected, everyone's like, oh, you guys have a Black president. What more do you want? Like the diversity conversation is over. Yet and still, when we think about the US, there are more CEOs called John or David than there are female CEOs. Just think about that. That's crazy. Only 7.5% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women and less than 1% are Black. And more than 85% of executive positions are held by whites. And we're tired of the diversity conversation.
And we're tired of it.
And I think that the diversity conversation, I am glad that we are hearing about it more. I'm glad that we're seeing it. Of course, I think it's disgraceful what it's taken to get to this point, and it's not just what it took, but all the stars had to align. If we weren't in the middle of a pandemic when that happened, we would still be in the exact same place right now because it was a very different situation. I think what troubles me is it's okay. We're talking about D&I and it's a hot topic, but it's what do people understand about it? And the issue is people have no idea about all of the things that you and Ashley, Rocki, that you guys have just talked about. I get an impression that D&I is seen by many people effectively like as charity, like as for people of color, if we're taking race for a moment here, that they're being done a favor. And it's like, no, that's not what this is about. And so I think it's around trying to, yes, okay, now that we have D&I, we have a spotlight on this, but it's about just flipping things and just trying to change what the topic is around it and getting people to understand this isn't about charity. This isn't about, just pure stats. This is about, yes, it's about what's right and what's moral, but it's what's best for companies. It is what's best for individuals. It's best all round. It's not a case of, oh well, my company are doing it because they have to do it, they need to be seen to be doing it, whether it's a PR exercise or they feel it's the right thing to do. No, you don't feel it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do for so many reasons. It's getting people to understand that. It's getting people to understand all of the things that Ashley was just talking about and that Rocki was just talking about. And I think that's where there's a real disconnect. People are going, oh, it's being talked about. In my mind, it's still being talked about a lot of the time in the wrong terms.
Yeah. Like it's quota based. Like it's, oh, well, here's our diversity hire. Or now we have a new diversity and inclusion chief of diversity and I mean, people rolling their eyes while they're saying it. So I'm like, how do we have roots? How do we grow roots out of something if people aren't actually taking a hold of it? And how do you actually embrace D&I when you still have people who are rolling their eyes about it? I mean, it is You know this, Rocki, and
Yeah.
it is about it's not about changing the numbers or the color, the different colors that we have on our landing page of our leadership, right? It's about a change of heart, and that's something that, Rocki, I know that you are. This is for you. This is your lifeblood. I mean, this is everything that you are is about. Let's not make it about lip service. This is about a change of heart. And so how do you do D&I so that it sticks long term, Rocki?
Yeah, I think you have to tackle it from two perspectives. And Erika, I think you're so right. And I think that lack of knowledge, Erika, what you said was, we're not even using the right words. We don't know what to do. And I think this is the ultimate problem with diversity. Let's be honest. If you're in the conversation today, I want you to answer a question in the chat. Just throw it in there. If you grew up being told not to talk about race, religion, color, politics at work, just give us a thumbs up in the chat, because most of us grew up in that way. And so now what's happening is we're being asked to have conversations that we are literally not equipped to have. We don't know the right words to use. We don't know the right things to say. And diversity is the only kind of business initiative that feels personal, and it feels targeted, and there's guilt and shame involved, right? And people don't know what to do, and they don't know what to say. And so when you think about diversity, to your point, I think so many times it's approached from a perspective of charity, but what it needs to be, what it is the challenge with diversity as a business proposition, from my point of view, is that it's the only business proposition where you really have to tackle hearts and minds almost concurrently, right? And so, and you have to look at this systemically, because there's so many places where bias come into the process. And so let's think about it from just my point of view. Of course, as I said at the top of the hour, my company is a applicant tracking tool. We're talent acquisition suite. So we're really focused on that intersection between diversity and recruitment. And I've spent 30 years of my life in recruitment. And so we've spent time this year developing a diversity hiring toolkit. It allows companies, we built a maturity model to say, here's what it looks like. Here's what good diversity recruitment programs look like. And one of the things we did is we built it with a couple of things in mind. First of all, thinking about diversity brand equity. If you're a company that isn't saying to people and being really open and public about, here's where we are, here's what we want to accomplish, and here's how we embrace multiple dimensions of diversity, and not just putting the token clip art on your website, but really integrating conversations that make diverse people feel like they would be welcome, and that they would be included, and that they belong at your company, you're missing the boat. So kind of this maturity model that we've built is built on 4 key pillars of success. And that first key pillar is diversity brand equity. The second key pillar is about sourcing strategically. You can't just put diversity in front of your sourcing practices or post the job on the, whatever it is website and think the diverse talent, the diverse, candidates are going to rain down on you. It's not going to happen. I'm tired of hearing diverse candidates don't exist. That's a crock of crap. They do exist, but you have to be strategic in terms of how you pursue and how you build long-term partnerships and long-term candidate pools within your sourcing strategy. So the second pillar is about sourcing strategically. Now, here's where it gets really tricky. If I'm sourcing over here, because I bet if we've got talent acquisition professionals on the line, you're really feeling the pressure because our CEOs made these pledges about we're going to be a more diverse company. They had no idea how to do it. And then they turned to talent acquisition and said, go find a bunch of whatever check the box people, and that's going to solve the problem. Let me tell you guys something. Diversity can never exist. Diversity and representation is key and critical, but it can never exist in a vacuum of equity, inclusion, and belonging. If you don't get those right in your culture, nothing else is going to work. So if you're sourcing strategically and you've got great brand equity, but then you're bringing them into a bias process where we're lost, right? So the third pillar is, do you have fair and equitable hiring processes? So if I'm blind, how do I even apply? Do your people understand how to offer me reasonable accommodations? Has your website been through an accessibility audit? Am I like, it's really funny you talked about white men. You know, I can't tell you the times in my career where I have sat across an all-white interview panel or an all-white man interview panel. I guarantee you, if any white man that I know walked into a room and the whole panel was black, they'd completely freak out. They completely freak out. So can we think about what the experience our candidates are having and who's part of your interview panel? If your interview panel isn't diverse and you haven't empowered those people to actually speak up and call out bias, then you're putting people into a diverse pipeline, right? And I'm speaking very highly about what all of these things mean. And you need to make sure when we talk about organizational accountability, which is my final, how are we holding people accountable? So here's one thing I will tell you. Every business problem I know that has been effectively resolved, it's because it's tied to competencies that we've taught people in the organization and that we require. And it's part of a performance review process, and it's part of a bonus payout. I guarantee you, if you made diversity part of everybody's bonus payout and their competency and their performance review, you'd see a change in how quickly we get this done and we integrate it. I think the other piece of this is that we don't tell everyone, guess what? I'm a chief diversity officer. Diversity is not my responsibility for our organization. I'm a catalyst for a change. It's everyone's responsibility. But what we don't do is we don't teach people what their role in the process is. And so we need to do that education, and we need to be able to say, receptionist, this is what you do, and here's what your role is in diversity, and CEO, here's what your role is. And we need to hold people accountable and have that organizational support. So I think from my perspective, that doesn't even start to cover the cultural work that you need to do. But I think so many people want to focus on diversity recruitment, and they want to focus on where can I find the diverse talent without fixing all the other pieces around it. And then I will say this one last thing, because I feel like I'm hogging the mic a bit, but
No.
here's because I could talk about this for hours, but here's the other piece about it. As a chief diversity officer, I feel like we don't spend, and even myself, I don't spend enough time having conversations around people. We talk about, because the work we're doing is creating systemic change so that people feel comfortable coming into the process. But I think to the point that we're having earlier, we're doing change. Now, let me tell you something. So I almost think it's almost too early to have this conversation about, have we seen enough change? If you look at change management strategies, change management takes 3 to 5 years to actually see it embedded into an organization. All we're seeing right now is kind of the beginning of that change funnel. And the question is, will it be sustained? But I think the problem is that we don't spend enough time talking about people. And ultimately, this should be about people and doing the right thing by people. And I think back to that problem about white men, white women, people of privilege, even social economic, not understanding and connecting is why we created the podcast. So when you're talking about to someone about being neurodiverse, and they're like, I don't understand, what's the big deal about this neurodiversity? What we really hoped is that you could say, oh, you don't understand what that's like. take 30 minutes, listen to this session, listen to Dr. Dave Caldwell talk about what it feels like to walk through the corporate world as a person that's neurodiverse, and listen to him say things like, it was easier for me to get my PhD in physics than it was for me to learn how to have a conversation as a stranger. Because we think storytelling and having the conversations about people then starts to connect all these business initiatives you're asking me to do to why we're doing it, and to heart. And that for me is the heart and mind approach we need to take as we look at diversity.
And you and Ashley both talked about it. It's people. It's not about policy. It's not policy. It's not quotas. It's not processes. It's the change starts with the people, you know. And Ashley, when you're talking, when you're going into these places, I mean, do you feel like the conversations that you're having with the leadership, are they around policy and process? I mean, is that their knee-jerk response is, well, okay, we need to put a policy in place? Or are they talking about people change?
It's a little bit fluff in the middle, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the reality is, if you're going to go policy, let's do policy properly. What measures, incentives, and things are we going to align people's performance on this? Like, you know, if it really matters, why do we not evaluate it like we evaluate sales targets? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, let's really.
Everyone likes the bonus idea, Rocki. I mean, follow the money.
But also, yeah, exactly. Link it to people's pockets. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if it matters that much to business performance and it's having a lag on your bottom and top line, then we'll, you know, why does it not matter like that? So if we're going to talk about policy, let's really talk about what the policy change that we need to have there is. Yeah, let's talk up and out. Like, do you know what I mean? If we're not doing things, let's talk how we manage some of our people out if they're not towing along this as well. That's the real policy that we should be talking about if we're going to be talking on that lens. And if we're talking about people, then again, well, you know, what support are we doing? Again, I think, you know, we read about this back in 2019 about the panacea of the one-woman band or the chief diversity officer, and people kind of assume it's a silver bullet. It's kind of great, we've got this. Like, yeah, exactly. This person's going to solve all of our cultural issues, all of our hiring issues, all of our press and comms and PR issues, and amazing. And it's like, if we're going to talk about people, then this needs to be around people as well. And exactly to Rocki's point, like, what does that mean for the person on the front desk? What does that mean for customer support teams when they're getting inbound from customers? What does it mean for our marketing teams? What does it mean for our HR colleagues? What does that mean for you know, our product team, our engineering team? You know, why should the data scientists be left out because they're kind of over there? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, let's really talk about people, and let's talk about how this is everybody's responsibility, therefore, and everybody plays a role in that. And sadly, in reality, you know, organizations are starting to have the conversation, which, you know, I've got to say, at least that's a start. I mean, back in 2019,
it's a start,
you know, before the last year, I mean, like, do you know, to even get the hour to talk about this stuff was a challenge. Do you know what I mean? It was success to even start to have the conversation. So look, we've made a few steps forward in that manner, but, you know, the quality of that conversation needs to improve, because now it's actually about, you know, if we think about this as a change management piece rather than kind of just a crisis response moment, which a lot of people, you know, frankly, that's where a lot of organizations have been. It's crisis response. It's our Black employees are saying that we need to do something now. It's like our, you know, our marketing, the world is, you know, literally on fire in some places. We need to, you know, have a PR response. You know, so it's been crisis management. So how do we change that from crisis management to change management? And we're not really having that conversation right now. I think we're coming out of that crisis response mode, but I'm yet to see across the board, and there are some organizations that are doing it, but across the board that evolution from crisis to change. And as I said, we're kind of caught in this fluffy moment where it's a bit like, you know, frankly, it's a bit of paralysis of choice. There are about, you know, 50 different things we can do. I mean, people have been working in this space, as Rocki said, for ages. There are ideas and the thinking is out there. And really, it's about what do we do as an organization. I think what a lot of organizations are trying to grapple with is this a flash in the pan? Is this something that will go away in 2 years' time? And, you know, is effectively the cost of inaction one that we are happy to stomach? Or actually, is this something that we need to make a systemic change around? And that might mean that we have to pull up a few trees and do a few things. And is that a cost that we're waiting, you know, that we are willing to do? I think where big tech are interesting actually is frankly, because they're cash cows, they've got the money to place both bets. Do you know what I mean? They can be quite progressive and they can go out there because they have the money to go and do it. They have the money to build up big teams. They have the money to really think about this deeply. They have the money to set up, independent boards and get advisors and all these other things out. I think where companies that aren't in that very particular cash cow niche are struggling with this is like, do we stick or twist? I'm not sure, again, going to that question, enough companies are happy with how they justify the business case. I now think most people are aware of the business case of doing it. I think most people would agree that having diverse teams, you call it variety. Lots of people like variety. Do you know what I mean? If you go to a network and there's a variety of food, everyone's like that. Call it diversity then. It's the same thing. Like, do you know what I mean? People like variety, diversity, whatever it is. Yeah. So I don't think people are dissuaded on that. It's about how do I actually make that happen with my limited resources, and is this something really that I'm going to pin my next 3 pillars of my strategy for the next 3 years. And that's where the fluff is coming in, and I think there's a paralysis of choice. So right now, what I really see is we need a few of those organizations to take the lead and to continue to bang the drum and talk about it positively and show people that this is the right thing to be doing. And if you aren't doing that, you are now falling at a competitive disadvantage, because we've got better products, we've got better people, our employees are happier, people want to work for us, and actually now you are losing out both in the talent market, the product market, the marketing market, and all of that stuff. And as that starts to become more and more evident, you will then start to see some of those lagging companies start to really try and twist the dial in terms of how do we catch up, because damn, we really want to recruit diverse people, but they're not coming to us. Our talent brand is really poor and we've got no way of engaging with them. So, no surprise anyone wants to go and work for X company, Y company, Z company. Well, because they've been doing something about it for years. Do you know what I mean? So how are you now going to play that and catch up? So, that's kind of where I think things are going.
Well, and I also think that there's going to be, we're throwing around phrases in my world about the great resignation that's coming and the great rehire. Yeah. So now that you're seeing recovery happen in the market, you're seeing all of these jobs open at rates that we didn't even see pre-pandemic, right? And you're now seeing all those people who were scared to change jobs during the pandemic. They're saying, okay, I'm ready to go. And, there's a Glassdoor statistic that says something like 76 or 78% of people look at diversity. Now, I want you to listen to what I said. I didn't say 78% of people of color or people of diverse backgrounds. 78% of people are looking at diversity as a key factor in their decision-making process. So if you're looking to hire during this great rehire and you're looking not to lose people during the great resignation, this is something you're going to need to think about. The challenge is, how authentic are we? And when I look at the authenticity of some of these, and I love that, Ashley, like, how do we change from crisis response to change management, right? I think companies are still in crisis response. And I do think it is I said, it's interesting. I said, when this whole thing kind of came back and this whole came up, we've talked about moving from a moment to a movement, but how do we move from a movement to just this being part of a sustainable business proposition? And I think we've made it from moment to movement. I'm not convinced that we've made it to sustainable business proposition, and that's going to be the challenge. I think you're going to have a 12 to 18 month life cycle on why this conversation is really popular, and that's why I said I'm not sure we're ready to have the conversation. So I mentioned the toolkit that we put out. Part of that toolkit, and I've put it in the chat, please take advantage of it. It's really awesome. You can benchmark your company's diversity recruitment processes. After you take the assessment, it's going to deliver to you a 20-page actionable report about what you can do next. Because we wanted to remove the barrier of excuses of, I don't know what to do. Okay, we'll tell you what to do. Or I can't afford a consultant. If you got a Deloitte or a Boston to do what we're giving to you, you'd easily pay $25,000, $30,000. So we're going to remove that excuse. I can't afford it. I can't afford a consultant. You don't need one. Take the assessment. We're going to tell you what to do. what's interesting is we've had over 350 companies, we're probably closer to 400 now, take that assessment. And when we look at the data that's coming back, that tells me that people are really either at the very beginning or they're still in crisis mode and haven't decided how they're going to invest. One of the questions we asked was, do you have the right budget to be able to execute the goals you've been given around diversity hiring? 63% of people said no. Okay. When you think about some very simple things that people have done, like when you ask how many people actually consistently publicize their diversity plans, their commitments, their metrics and outcomes, only about half of the companies do. Right? So if we're saying, look, we're going to be transparent, we're going to invest in this, what I'm telling you is that behind the scenes, people are saying it's not really happening. Erika, like I know that you have passion around kind of equity and equality, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. But we've got companies that are writing big checks to the NAACP or whatever the popular group is at the time, and that's great. But sitting in their own organization, they have employees that are not being paid and they don't have pay equity. Like if you took that money and actually came into your own organization and dealt with pay equity issues now and making commitments, then that's sustainable change instead of this one-time tax deductible, highly visible action that I'm going to take that makes me feel good.
Good marketing move. This is a strategic marketing move. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge. And when you think about, where have we come, and you say it's too early, it is too early, but I guess to really call it one way or the other, but are we seeing the right movements? There's noise. Is it the right noise? I think that's the question. And yes, we want the noise to continue, but it comes back to being able to talk about it. It comes back to getting people to understand it. It's really easy for and very obvious for three people sat here on this panel today why we would understand it. I understand because I know Debi, why Debi understands it, but there's lots and lots of people out there that don't. And so it's around, if you want to continue the conversation and we want to continue it to be the right conversation, we have to be discussing the right things and people have to understand it. How do you get people to understand it? And that's where my thoughts around equity come into this and people not understanding. And I had a conversation with somebody that felt that it was very unfair that there was a quota for X number of CVs to be of people from minority backgrounds, because she was saying that's not equality, it needs to be equal, and then if everybody's has an open mind, which is impossible to do in the first place, but even still, let's say that it's a level playing field, and rather than talk about it in terms of employment, let's talk about it in terms of healthcare in the States. So if we from tomorrow gave every single American access to the exact same healthcare, everybody's got exactly the same, that's equality, right? No, it's not. Because of the years and years and centuries where people of color haven't had access to the same level of, same quality of healthcare as others, they're kind of down here when it comes to their health. So if you give everybody exactly the same, okay, maybe people move up, but they're still here. The disparity is still there. So you can't achieve equality until you work on equity and you work on plugging that gap. And I think that's why that lack of understanding is where people are getting the D&I fatigue, because they just don't understand what needs to go into it and what needs to happen to actually achieve equality. And equity versus equality in my mind is the same thing as the same notion as black. Well, black need to make that happen before we can get Black Lives Mattering, which would be equality. So if you're trying to skip to the end, people say, okay, let's just go for equality. Well, we're not on a level playing field, so that can't happen.
Well, and I think that that's it's perspective, right? It's perception. And if I've never had to if I've never had to deal with it because I'm white, then if I think, oh, well, we just hired 3 new Black people, everybody should be happy. We've got all kinds of Black people hired. Are they being supported? Are they being embraced? Are they being, were they trained? It's not just having somebody in the building. It's embracing that individual and his or her strengths and individual qualities. And it is bringing this person in and recognizing their gifts and not just their skin color. I mean, that's been the root of the problem all along. It's not about numbers. It's about actual embracing and adoption, and it's not just about awareness. Okay, yeah, we know it's important. Yeah, we know the diverse candidates. Okay, we should have more Black people on the website. I mean, those are just symptoms of the problem. Those are symptoms of the problem. And you can't just patch the symptom and cover it up so everything looks a little cleaner and then call it a day. Just like you can't hire a diversity officer and then check the box because, well, if there are any issues, well, the diversity officer will take care of it. Well, of course there are issues. But like Rocki was saying, it's conversations that happen at every function, every level of the organization. It's not this one person's problem to come in and fix everybody's lifetime of bias.
It's a challenge. It's interesting. Just Capital, I'm really a fan of their work. So much so that I'm sitting on one of their advisory board councils right now. And one of the things that Just Capital does is they look at companies being more just companies. And there was I think it was like a survey that they did last year where 86% of people are saying it's time for companies to switch their view of capitalism. It's time. 2020 was that moment where companies need to change their point of view and start to look at how they care for their people and their communities, et cetera, in a better way. And I think we're going to see companies like Just Capital really start to hold companies accountable. I'll tell you. I'm a wife and mother of 4, and we have this phrase in our house that says, "Don't let your mouth write a check that your ass can't cash." Companies are writing checks all over the place, and I think companies like and organizations like Just Capital are going to hold them accountable for actually either aligning with that commitment or holding them accountable and saying, you didn't do this. This was performative DEI and you didn't mean what you said. I think people now I'm hoping people are going to have more courageous conversations internally. One of the things that I'll be honest, I'm really concerned about is that as we've amplified certain voices, do other voices feel shut down? So to the conversation and the point you made earlier, Debi, that I really want to address when you say I've got white men going, I'm the devil now, right? And that's a problem because look, white men, I don't blame you because, 600 years ago, your ancestors enslaved my ancestors. We can't go back and change that. Okay. But what I do need you to recognize is that as we've come down through that history, what you've been provided with is a set of privilege that I did not have. And I don't want you to feel guilt and shame about it. I want you to acknowledge it. I want us to be able to have conversations about it as human beings and as people. And I want us to be able to move forward. I need white men at the table to be allies. You're an important part of this conversation. And in certain cases, white men, you're going to be the people that can change the minds of others better than I can. And so what I need you to do is get a bit over your fragility. And I need you to go, okay, you know what? I'm going to be part of the solution. And guess what? Look at the stats I gave you earlier. 85% of executive positions are still being held by whites. So, oh my gosh, if we moved it to 65%, are you all of a sudden going to lose all your generational wealth and all your power and privilege? Like, let's just be realistic about that. And the truth of the matter is I don't want you to give me anything except for an opportunity. I'm not taking your charity. I'm not taking something that belongs to you. I'm asking for an opportunity to compete. Just that simple. And if I beat you out fair and square, then I beat you out fair and square. Let's go sit down and have a beer and talk about it. And maybe I can help you find the next job. Like, that's how the world should work.
I love it. That's a wonderful place to end. And we are at time. We could have gone on forever and ever, but thank you both. I mean, Rocki and Ashley, that was what a great conversation, an important one. I thank you both for sharing your perspectives and all of your insight. Yeah, we've got just a wonderful group here today. And I think that everybody in the chat is, yeah, interested in finding out more about what good looks like and how they can get there. You know, so important steps. These are baby ones, right? And you're right, Rocki. We're not going to see much of a change in 365 days, but hopefully we see a little bit more of a change 365 days from now, right? And then a little bit more 365 days from then. It's gradual, and it's.
I mean, I want a lot.
I would also love a lot.
A lot of change much more quickly, please.
Yeah, like I don't want to go at this pace. I'm allowing it because it's the first step. But do you know what I mean? It's like a baby learning to walk. You can't be stumbling all the time.
Yeah, you're right about that. Yep. All right. So FF, everybody, fast forward. Well, thank you all for your time. Next week, let's see, we've got Shafiq on, and he's going to have Terry and Drew Edwards. They're going to be talking about why most hiring managers won't buy from you and what you can do about it. So that sounds like a great show. I thank everybody for coming, and thank you for your voices, your thoughts, and I hope you all have a great week. Take care.
Thank you guys for having us. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.